Hello, darling.
I don't know why you're saying hello when we've been together all night.
We've been together all night. That's true.
It's almost the end of our date.
That's true. It's almost the end of our date.
I'm getting a little bit nervous because it's almost the end of the date and I don't want it to end.
And that's very much how people may feel towards the end of a coaching session, right?
It's almost always the way they feel at the end of a coaching session.
With the exception being that coaching sessions are supposed to end and dates could, depending upon their relationship and how long you've been seeing each other. And
Oh, wait, no, we can't talk about this anymore.
No, we can, because I think it's an important distinction and I think it's relevant to how to end a session, which is what the topic is about today, right?
Right. A date might be at the beginning of something else.
Right. And dates can be open-ended. Coaching sessions are supposed to follow a structure so that people can have a contained set of feelings inside of a little laboratory and work on a very specific problem intensely for a very short period of time.
Yes.
So I have a lot of thoughts about, people have been asking, well, how do you
end a session?
Yeah. And I have a lot of thoughts about it. And I think that the experience of talking about this might sound like a set of contradictory advice, thoughts, and feelings. But if you follow it closely, you'll see there's a set of principles underneath that will help people to make the right decision with the right client.
Yes. I'm very anxious to hear what you have to say about it because I have a lot of thoughts about it too. So good.
Well, you go first. What are your thoughts?
Well, here's why it's hard for me. I know that the hottest stuff comes up in the last 5 minutes. And then you have to figure out, well, when is the last 5 minutes? Because sometimes it feels like the last 5 minutes are happening as the last 5 minutes are ending. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Let's just talk structurally for a minute first and what the purpose is of having a structure.
Sure. Spoken like a true J.
Well, yeah. I mean, I am an INTJ, and this does have to do with systems, but there are times when you want structure. Like if you had a brain surgeon or a heart surgeon, you want them to have a structure for the operation. You want them to have a set of checklists, and you want them to have a hygienic laboratory that they do the operation in, and you want them to have procedures and rules in place so that the operation gets done successfully, right?
Yes.
I think that to a certain extent, that coaching is kind of like an operation. Now, it's not psychotherapy. We're not dealing with mental illness, or we're dealing with the worried well as opposed to the mentally ill. And so it's not quite as serious. But nevertheless, the structure of having a discrete period of time where you're going to focus forces the full set of feelings surrounding the problem that you're working on, the goal you're trying to achieve. It forces it into language. It forces it into the room. When you deviate from that structure, you're allowing some of the intensity to leak out. You're setting up a situation where the feelings and insights and ideas and difficult emotions and obstacles and conflicts, where they can start to be acted out as opposed to articulated and solved. There really is a purpose. There really, really is a purpose to having a structure. But by the same token, you don't want to have a bell that goes off at the 45 minutes or an egg timer that says, okay, time's up. We'll have to talk about that next week.
Right.
That can be kind of rude and disengaging and abrupt, and that can be traumatizing to a client as well, right?
Oh, yeah.
I would probably say that if you have to err in one direction, err in being overgiving as opposed to over-depriving.
Right.
And you should be aware that when you begin a session, there is anticipation, excitement, anxiety, disappointment, everything in that initial moment when you're beginning the session. And similarly, the process of disengaging also engenders anxiety, excitement, fear.
Feelings of abandonment.
At the same time, there are feelings of excitement about, well, what did I learn? How did this experience change me? And now can I go and try it in the world?
How am I going to apply it? Right. Yeah.
Here's the rub. As the coach, you need to develop an ultra sensitivity to what your client really needs to move forward in the world. And sometimes they need just a little bit extra. Sometimes they need just a little bit of extra time, and they need to know that you went the extra mile for them and that there's someone in the world who's giving them just a little bit more than they deserved. I think that's perfectly fine.
Maybe not deserve, but a little bit more than they expected.
Well, yeah. I think to the extent that coaching is a professional agreement and you get paid for the time, when you get more time than you paid for, then you got a little bit more than you bargained for, right?
Right. I always take issue with the word deserve because it's just a personal peeve of mine. I think that we all deserve and nobody deserves.
That's true. The first takeaway is that there is no one way to end a session. It's very dependent upon the individual client and the relationship, but sessions do have to come to an end. There's that paradox. There's no one way to do it, but sessions really do have to come to an end. And the more regular you are, the more successful you probably will be with your practice, because it's very difficult. I mean, it's kind of easy when you have one or two clients to have a 45-minute session go to be an hour and 15. When you have 20 clients or 40 clients, it's impossible. It's not impractical, it's impossible to successfully manage your day and be present for that many clients without having a break in between as scheduled so that you can recoup and recover and let those feelings flow through you.
Right. That makes total sense.
Okay, that was my first primary thought about how to end a session.
I mean, one thing also is that you have to establish what the timing is for the session because you have another one after it. You want your clients to know what to expect so that they won't feel abandoned. It's just a fact. The session goes from this time to this time. Maybe there's a few minutes leeway.
This is your time. I reserved it for you.
Yeah.
This is your time. And I guess while we're talking about that, some coaches get into a thing where they try to schedule sessions every 45 minutes with no time whatsoever in between.
That's nuts. Yeah, that's really bad.
That's pretty kooky. You don't have any time to detox. You don't have any time to get a drink of water. You don't have any time to go to the bathroom.
Take a breath.
Yeah. So then I thought we could talk about the situations where it becomes difficult to end the session, where it feels very awkward. Many coaches feel it's impossible to end the session in an effective, genuine way. And I was wondering, did you have a situation or two you could talk through to illustrate and help people to understand what those were about?
I have found that it's typical that at the end of a session, something hot comes up. And it doesn't matter who it is or what it is, something hot comes up.
Why? Why do you think that is?
Oh, I think the person is beginning to get scared of disengaging. I think that I'm seen as a warm, caring person, and they don't want to give up on that. And I think I have a part in it. Also, you know this about me, I've told you this a million times. I have to force myself to be the one to get off the phone first. Always. Right? I have to force myself to do that, to have some boundaries. Otherwise, I end up getting my feelings hurt because somebody's always hanging up on me.
You will always stay on the phone as long as whoever you're talking to.
You need me, I'm here.
You love to be needed.
I do. I love to give, but it's also a bit of a character flaw on my part because it doesn't give any push. Do you know what I mean?
It makes you a very sweet person.
I know it's sweet, but...
Well, and it's part of the reason that you can be a phenomenal coach and people really bond to you.
Right. But also it makes it a little bit harder for them to separate. And so I'm not doing them a service if I don't help them separate and go off in the world and, be whole.
And the other thing that happens is they fall in love with you just a little too much. It's really okay. In my worldview, it's necessary that clients both love and hate their coaches and that coaches both love and hate their clients. That doesn't mean you act out on it.
Well, of course.
But what happens if you give too much is that you're going to miss the second half of the experience. And the second half of the experience is how do they deal with the frustration and anger that stops them in the world. See, if all you do is give to them and you give them more than they really expect all the time, and it's way more, then it won't be possible for them to feel the frustration with you. And if that frustration doesn't come into the room, you're going to miss an opportunity to heal that frustration in vivo so that they can solve the problem that they're working on.
That makes total sense, sure.
Right.
I mean, I understand that intellectually.
Kind of sucks when you have to.
It's a struggle. It really is because I love them all.
And no coach really wants their client to feel frustrated with them.
Exactly.
And it's a very bizarre insight when you realize that to help clients really achieve their goal and keep them for the long run, you have to allow them to have a balanced set of feelings for you. They can't just love you. As good as it feels and as much as they want to, if you just set it up so they love you, then they don't make the progress that you want them to make.
Right. That they've asked you to help them with.
Right.
Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you this afternoon. Oh, I don't know how I forgot about it. But I mean, it's so relevant to what we've been talking about this whole session. But this guy came up to me and he asked me to run a workshop. And it's a really good opportunity for me.
Mm-hmm.
I have to tell him by Monday.
What was his name?
George.
Did something really happen, or are you role-playing?
I'm role-playing.
Okay, so you're role-playing. What would happen? They would call this a door?
You believe me? You asked me for a situation, so I was acting it out.
So you got to tell him by Monday. And what do we need to figure out before then?
I don't know what to do.
Could you write to me about it? Maybe put your pros and cons on a piece of paper and write to me about it. Send me an email, and I'll write you back. Or do you want to set up another quarter of a session for tomorrow sometime?
I think we should do a quarter of a session. I think I have to talk it through.
Okay. Do you want a quarter of a session, or would you rather have a half a session? You want a whole session? It's up to you. I can probably work it out tomorrow.
Okay, sure.
Sure what?
Sure, let's do a session tomorrow because it's really important.
Okay. What's your schedule like tomorrow evening? I can probably free up something around 7:30.
My husband's coming back from Tokyo, and I have to get... I really have to prepare for him because he's going to be exhausted. And oh, by the way, do you remember I was telling you about his trip?
What time is your husband coming back?
At 6.
He's coming back at 6?
Uh-huh.
I want to help you. It sounds really constructive what you're trying to work out, but I'm not sure I can schedule something before 6. I could maybe do 7:15.
I really can't.
Okay. What about Monday morning? Maybe I can do 15 minutes before I start at 7:45.
I guess I could do that.
Why don't we do that? I can ask the 8 o'clock person to move back for about 5 minutes, give us a little extra time.
Okay.
Maybe you can be thinking about it between now and Monday morning, and we'll talk about it then.
Okay.
Now, here's what's going to happen. I could tell you 100% what's going to happen in that situation. You would have gone out and thought about it. By the time Monday morning came, you would call me and tell me that, it seemed like such an emergency when I was talking to you, but as I thought it through, I figured out what to do, and what I'm going to do is blank. We would have talked about it a little bit, and you would have been fine.
With the quarter of a session.
You would have been fine, yeah. Because what you needed was to know that you weren't being totally abandoned, that you had my company to make the decision. But you also need to understand that you lived in a world of adults and reality. And not that I would say that to you directly, I kind of communicated it through the scheduling. I would say 9 times out of 10 when clients would do that with me, by the time that they actually had the emergency session, it wasn't really an emergency anymore.
Right. Let's role play another one.
Okay, go ahead.
That was good. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm so glad we got to talk today.
You did a really good job. Tell me what was on your mind. You laughed and you cried and you... Yeah, you did a really good job. You had all of your feelings today. Could you try to articulate? I don't quite understand what you're saying. What is it that's making you cry?
But it's not funny.
We have another minute or two. We have another minute or two.
I can't do it. I just can't do it.
What is it that you can't do?
I don't feel strong enough. I just can't. I can't do it.
That's a normal feeling. It's not unusual, the situation that you're in, not feel strong enough. What do you think about the idea of not feeling strong enough and being able to do it anyway? What about not feeling strong enough the whole time and being able to do it anyway?
I can't do it. So what I'm saying is that, I'm sorry, but someone will just cry and cry and cry. And those were great interventions. This was a coaching session and all of a sudden I've got somebody crying like crazy.
First of all, people cry.
It's the end of the session.
I know. People cry, and you treat it differently at the end of the session than you do in the middle of the session. Part of what that means is that towards the end of the session, you're going to interact with them a lot more.
Can we do it the other way? Can I just try something if you don't mind?
Sure.
Could you be the crier?
I don't know.
Please cry.
Okay. You want me to be a client who is terribly distraught at the end of the session and just can't face life alone?
Mm-hmm.
I hardly ever cry.
This is true.
Well, I cried all the time when I was a kid. I got all my tears out.
I'm so proud of you for crying. This is wonderful.
Thank you.
And I think it would be really wonderful for you after we get off the phone and over the next couple of days if you really let yourself cry some more. Crying is wonderful. It's really healing and cathartic.
Yeah, that's good.
Yay.
And the one piece that I would add is that, I'm going to be really curious what the words are behind the tears. I'm always pushing to people to put things in words.
Yeah. I remember that one session that we were in years ago when you and I first got together.
That was like 40 years ago. I know what you mean.
That guy who cried and cried and cried. There was no words. He cried for like half an hour or an hour. I don't know. It was some crazy amount of time.
That was a therapy session and not a coaching session. I don't think the therapist did the right thing there.
It was blubbering. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way. It wasn't words.
It gets at the question about what's maturational. It's certainly maturational to accept your feelings and have constructive ways of letting them out. And most people have developed defenses against their tears and have pushed them down and spent a lot of energy not really letting themselves have those feelings. But another way of staying stuck is to get involved with the tears and try to relive where you were. And it's almost like, if you think about the 1960s touchy-feely emotional marathons where people would smack pillows and scream and...
Right, like the Primal Scream stuff, yeah.
I've seen people get very addicted to those and enjoy the feelings in them, but I haven't seen their lives significantly improve as a result of that. And I'm more interested, and I think we need to be more interested as coaches in helping their lives to improve. And their lives improve when they can put words to those feelings, because when you put words to the feelings, your adult intellect can kind of sort it all out. You say, oh, well, that's how I felt then. That's not really how it is now, or there's these similarities, but this is different, and I have these other choices, and I'm more capable in this way.
And babies don't have words. That's why they need to cry. It's a way of communicating.
And so as a coach, sometimes you need to let the emotion happen.
I think crying is fabulous, but I think you're right about what are the words behind it.
And what are the words behind it? In the middle of a session, if someone's doing that, you have a lot more leeway to let it happen. At the end of the session, you want to be compassionate and human, but you don't want to reward the client for emoting at the end of the session and develop a pattern like that.
Right.
And so the way to fix that is to talk a little bit more. Gently, like I was doing with you, but talk a little bit more, push a little sooner for the words. And you say, well, we have another minute or two. Can you tell me what you're crying about it? And then you've got to have some suggestions for them. Like if a little girl is crying and she's really scared because, Maria won't give her the ball and she lost her dolly or whatever, then you say, oh, well, why don't you go back over to Maria and there's this other dolly over there, and you say, Maria, why don't we play with this doll? See, and you'd be talking to her right away. You wouldn't just let her cry and scream because she would get all worked up. You'd be talking to her right away. And so when a client feels incapable of going out of the room by their own, first of all, you probably let them get too regressed before that, and you needed to be talking to them 10 or 15 minutes before the session stopped, so you were interacting and they wouldn't get that regressed. But if they are that regressed, you need to have some nurturing suggestions for them to help them along their way.
Telling someone it's great that you cry. That's okay, you can do that. And then asking them, what's your plan for this week with regard to your program? Asking them some grounding questions and things that are more adult-ish, things that we do as adults, so that they can make an easier transition.
Yeah. The hardest thing to recognize is that if your clients are consistently not leaving on time and you're consistently having trouble ending the sessions, it's because you don't want them to leave.
Right, I get it.
Because it's not really that hard. Unless they're crazy, remember, we don't really work with crazy people. People that come for a coach, they want a constructive, cooperative relationship. Even though they might feel a little regressed sometimes because you're focusing on them, they recognize that it's a professional relationship. They want you to feel your needs are being met in the relationship too, to the extent that you have agreed upon. It's just not that hard. It's just not that hard to end unless you don't want it to end. And if you don't want it to end, well, good for you that you have those feelings. Because, then you can look forward to every client that you see.
And at the same time, for it to be most effective, you need to have boundaries.
And what you could tell yourself is, if I operate in a way to be most effective, then this client is going to grow more. They'll be able to afford 2 sessions a week with me, or 4 sessions a month when they're only coming twice a month. I'll actually get to watch them grow, and they're going to appreciate it more, and they're going to bond to me. A lot of these clients will bond to you for life. Some of them will keep coming, some of them will go away and then come back again,
And you'll have an indelible impact on them. They'll remember you and, how you help them forever.
I had a guy come running up in the street to me in the Bronx. I was in the middle of the street crossing Morris Park Boulevard, and he came running up to the street. He says, Dr. Livingston, you never cut me down. You gave me all this feedback, and I thought you cut me down because you were this big shot, and I wasn't sure that I could really do this, and you never cut me down, and I always remembered that, and I just wanted to tell you. And I said, could you tell me on the sidewalk, or we just go over to the other side? So
that's cool.
Yeah, I just think if there's anything else that really stops people from ending the session on time.
I think you're right. It's like, our attachment to these people because we like them. And, sometimes I think even if the other way around, that you are working with them, maybe they're not your favorite person. You want to give them because you feel guilty that they're not your favorite person.
Yep, that's possible. Here are a couple of other scenarios. One other scenario is you don't really like the person coming up after the person leaves. It's almost like there are 2 dishes being served and you want to keep eating the first one because the second one is broccoli or Brussels sprouts or something like that.
Right. Have to give them to Stewie.
So that's just something to be aware of. And when you don't like a client, you can help clients you don't like. But if you don't like them, you could consider that a personal challenge.
Exactly.
And some of the clients I liked the least wound up being the clients that I liked the most.
They change.
Because they changed me.
Yeah.
Because they really challenged me. They changed me.
Yeah. In general, coaches tend to overgive. They're caregivers, and we think that our role in the world is give. It makes it hard in that way, I think. It's self-concept.
I'm thinking about a guy that came in. It was a couple that came in, but it mostly was the man that was talking. And he came about 20 minutes late. And he said, this is for psychotherapy, not for coaching, but it's the same dynamic. He said, I can't ever see this working for me because I just can't deal with the fact that the session comes to an end and you go talk to someone else. I feel like I should be able to talk longer.
I think that's wonderful that he said that.
Isn't that wonderful that he could actually come in and say that?
Yeah. What guts.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was very early in my practice. I didn't handle that one very well. What I would do...
Get out of my office, jerk.
No. I actually kind of liked him. Between that one and the woman who called me and says she wants to make an appointment, but her central problem is that she can't keep appointments.
Oh my God, that's a problem.
What I would have done with that guy now, I said, well, it sounds like you need an extra free session. Sounds like we should pick a time, after you're working for a while together, when you really feel like you should get an extra free session, and I'll work it out to give you an extra free session. Sounds like you weren't given enough and you need a free session.
That's awesome.
That's probably what I would have done.
That's awesome. I love that. I never heard you say that before. I love it.
Well, it's very individual. I wouldn't do that with just anybody, but he just felt so depthfully wounded, and he just couldn't believe anybody could genuinely care about them and still get paid and be working in this professional way. And I had those feelings about him. I really wanted to help him. Sometimes it happens in the academy. Sometimes people don't really have a lot of money, but they really want to be a good coach, and I can feel the connection, and I think they should be. Sometimes they object to getting on a payment plan right away because the class isn't starting for a month and a half and they don't understand they need to reserve a spot. And sometimes I say, well, okay, I'll trust you. If you want to pay me from August until January instead of July till December, I'll trust you. If people have a constructive reason, if you can tell that they've got a constructive motivation for wanting something different, I'll try to go along with it and give it to them. I'm really not trying to create an army of duplicates. I'm trying to coach people's creative motivation out of them. And so I try to be very sensitive to what their constructive motivation is. And I'll bend myself a little like a pretzel if I can to help them with that, but not so far that I can't practice anymore. Not so far that, in case of the academy, not so far that I would jeopardize the academy's finances, but I'll work with them. Does this help to answer the question about how do you end a session?
I think so.
So let's just talk about a little more practicality.
Okay.
I think it's good to give the client a chance to say one or two last things. What that means is usually 2, maybe 3 minutes before the session ends, you say, I think we need to begin to wind down our session. So it's not an abrupt boot him out the door with your foot.
Bye.
Right? If there's anything else that you want to ask me or wanted to tell me about or question you had or concern or anything else that you wanted to articulate before we left, it'd be a good time to do it. Actually, usually don't say concern. I'm not sure why I said that just now. I don't invite them to have a concern. I just ask if they have any questions or...
Is there anything else you want to talk about for the next minute or two as we're beginning to end?
Yes.
Yeah, I like to help them get back into their day by asking them about, what are you going to do next?
Yeah.
Because that helps them to become adult again. Because even though it's a coaching session, there is some regression.
Then we sing the end of the session song. The end of the session now, and how,
Goodbye,
and now, the
farewell,
end of the session
now.
now.
Everything I do. Adieu, to you and you.
Gotta sing the end of the session song.
Right. This sounds like the end of the session.
It does.
Anything else you want to say before we begin to start to end?
I just really hope that people know I was kidding about the end of the session song. Okay, goodbye, sweetheart.
Bye, honey.
Thanks very much for your time and attention. If you'd like to find out more about taking your coaching to the next level, getting certified, and building the practice of your dreams, please visit becomearealcoach.com. 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 Thank you.